Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Vaish Sarathy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aaron. Happy to be here.
Why don't you just start us off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, always find this the hardest part of any introduction, but I I'm mom to an 18-year-old with he has Down syndrome, he's autistic and non-speaking, and he's also a poet. And that's his name is Sid, and I come to my work by way of Sid. My background is in chemistry, in which I have a PhD, and what I do is as you know, as I worked with Sid, as I parented Sid, as I taught him, I slowly found myself moving into the world of education.
Mhm.
And while I teach people throughout the neurodivergent spectrum, I teach AP Chem and Calc, and I also teach math and science, and by that I mean advanced math and science to many non-speaking autistic people who are my students. Broadly, I consider myself an educator, and one of the things that I'm really passionate about is bringing complex education to people that have really almost not seen any
Right.
education, which is true
Yeah,
for my students and my son.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I when I was preparing for the interview, I watched your TEDx talk, and it was a lot of similarities, I think, with the people assuming intelligence. I have a daughter. Her name is Cecilia. She's 22.
Hmm.
And she has cerebral palsy and epilepsy, but she's um somewhat nonverbal. I kind of call her. I can understand her if she speaks, but others that don't know her have a harder time. So as the way they test intelligence is either verbal or you need fine motor, which
Exactly.
she doesn't have good skills in either one of those. So every time we would get the test, I mean, I'm like, that doesn't, I mean, they tested her and I'm like, I don't believe that's the true picture.
Hmm.
Because, she couldn't, I mean, they can't modify the test, otherwise they're invalid, that whole spiel. And she would also just we'd be sitting, watching TV. She'd say a sentence with a complex word I've never heard her use before, use it in context. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
so just stuff like that where she would, it's just those are tests that just can't accurately test her. So yeah, your TEDx talk about the looking at a picture of your son and asking the question, "What do you see?" and the intelligence piece was very that was a great job on the TEDx talk.
Thank you. Yeah, and I completely agree with with the way IQ testing is done. We
Yeah,
just don't have the means to test for
no,
so-called intelligence, whatever that may even mean, right? We don't even know
right,
what it means, but we there's no way to test for it
right,
as when a child has motor difficulties. It's just
yeah,
not possible.
yeah. So yeah, but it's just then the bad side is, as you know, it just that carries with her, and then it just it kind of sets her on a certain path, and everybody sees that and makes those assumptions, and just
Yeah,
yeah, it kind of leads down a not a good path.
exactly.
Yeah. Let's start off. What is your definition of inclusion?
That's a hard one. My definition is whatever the student wants. It's not necessary. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not necessarily inclusive education because sometimes it serves a student, but sometimes it isn't. I think my definition is more from a community perspective where a student is offered the same opportunities no matter how they would like to access them. It's the opportunities and the education being equitable. That is my definition of inclusion. It's not necessarily sitting in the same classroom. It can be because many students
Mhm.
like that, but it doesn't have to be. So
Right.
it is the availability of the opportunities without any lowering and without any purposeful dumbing down and without any presuming that this person cannot do it.
Yeah. I love that. Did you have any exposure to disability before your son was born?
Absolutely not. I mean, I barely knew
Yeah.
what Down syndrome was when my son was
Right.
born. Like I had this like very vague picture of what people would look like. I didn't even know what it meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, that was kind of me. I don't remember any, you know, hearing about disability growing up or anything. So when my daughter was born, it's all new, and then just kind of went along with what the professionals said. And then once I started, like, stuff didn't make sense, like wasn't matching up. Like she was went to visit her like in kindergarten or pretty young, and other kids in that room were, folding towels already, and I was like,
Mm.
this seems a little young. Like, why are we already, like, assume, like your TEDx talk kind of talked about, was like, why are we already putting them in this box if they're not able to learn? Like, why are we, I mean, at minimum they should be in the room being exposed to it. I mean, why would we already be writing them off, um from being able to learn at that young of an age? So yeah, then just
Yeah.
kind of got down the path of inclusion. And but once she was already in that segregated classroom, like, trying to get her back into the general ed, that was a battle, because then you're like jumping through hoops that wouldn't be there if you're already in the classroom, and just all this crazy stuff. So yeah,
And
it
I
was
think that
quite.
makes you a braver person than me because it would just my blood pressure would shoot every time I had to like prove things to people. I couldn't
Yeah,
do it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I did not. Yeah, it was not the most fun thing, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit? When you in your TEDx talk, you use the word assume competence. I've always heard it said as presume competence. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about why you said assume versus presume?
Yes, and I actually said assume intelligence, and I'll talk about why
Okay.
I'm moving
Sure.
away. So, I think the presume competence language came into special education perhaps in the 80s.
Okay.
And I think it was educator Anne Donnellan who brought that in. And at the time, it's still very relevant, but at the time, it was a new concept and it was, I think it was like probably path breaking. And
Right.
now I've noticed my TEDx talk actually came in 2019, but
Sure.
and this situation has probably, now it's a buzzword, presuming
Hmm.
competence. And it doesn't, like a lot of it, people, therapists and educators that my son will go to will say they're presuming competence, but I'm not sure people really know what that means. I think what they think it means is that they're going to presume that you're capable unless you show them otherwise. And it's very easy for our kids to look like, well, we tried it presuming competence, but I don't think
Right.
this child is competent, right?
Right.
So, in my mind, at least, when I said assume intelligence, I was like, you are just assuming it. And the reason you have to assume is that if the child were able to demonstrate intelligence to you, you wouldn't have to assume it, you'd see it. You have
Right.
to assume because the child doesn't have the motor capacity. The child, I say child, but I could mean adult. Let me use a different word. The learner, the student,
Hmm.
doesn't have the fine motor and gross motor capacity to show intelligence because showing intelligence is not a cognitive skill, it's a motor skill. And when so you have to assume because you're kind of initially at least taking a leap of faith. And in my mind, competence is not enough. Competence is a very light fluff word in my mind.
Hmm.
I want you to assume, and by you, I mean an educator, anybody
Hmm.
who's in contact with a person with a disability, I want you to assume intelligence. I've even modified that now because I feel like there's so many loopholes where people feel like, okay, they've tried and it's not working.
Right.
I now ask, like, I've changed it to assume intelligence aggressively because I think that there's so many things that come in the way of a parent or an educator assuming intelligence because and often it's our own mental blocks. Sometimes
Yep.
it is what relatives say, sometimes it's what doctors say, therapists say, what even medical literature says, because the truth is that nobody knows. So you
Hmm.
have to systematically. Now, to give you an example, my son was born with Down syndrome and then had a dual, like, was given a dual diagnosis of autism, and he's non
Hmm.
speaking, and Down syndrome is considered an intellectual disability. So I had to really like try hard to like close my ears and say la 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 when anybody talked about intellectual
Hmm.
disability because if if I believed in that then I couldn't do even one step of what
Right.
I had done. So
Yes.
that's where the aggressive part comes. So I would say ditch presuming competence, assume intelligence aggressively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, because yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I'm just kind of rethinking, like, yeah, you're right. Because as a parent, you hear I mean, like I talked about, I just went along with what everybody said, and then just you kind of get to a point where it doesn't make sense. And yeah, it's true though.
Yeah, and it's very
Yep.
easy. I mean, like we only have so much willpower and time and
Yep.
energy as parents.
Yep.
And at some point, you're going to start listening to people. And that could even
Yep.
just be your own
Right.
doubts creeping in. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah. You talked about in the TEDx talk about you started teaching him like math and kind of kept progressing. Was that something you just did at home, or was that also stuff they were doing at school? Or
Oh, they weren't even teaching him. They were, I think they were teaching him how to count at school at the time that I
right.
was teaching him um, exponents at home. So yeah, so it was at home because um, this leap of faith, if you want to call it that, this assuming intelligence is a
Hmm.
pretty radical idea even for ourselves, right? It's hard to make that leap. And school is a system where they're working with multiple kids at the same time.
Yep.
And it takes a very progressive educator to make that jump.
Right. Yeah.
And it can happen. I think it should happen. But yeah, I was doing all of that at home. And I want to clarify that I was doing it without any input from my son because at the time his communication modalities hadn't
Hmm.
started. They hadn't. I mean, like we weren't really exploring alternative. The alternative communication we were exploring wasn't working for him, and even the ones that started working for him took years to actually kick in with like his
Sure.
incredibly fine motor. So I was just teaching. I wasn't waiting for him to say like he understood or like point at the right
Mhm.
answer. I was just doing my own thing.
Sure. Yeah. So you say he's a poet. So now is he? How is he able to communicate now?
He spells to communicate. He
Okay.
uses so a form of spelled communication where there's a letterboard. It's just a
Sure.
low tech. It's literally a
Yep.
stencil board with A through Z, and he points. And the form of spell communication that we started when he was 7 was called RPM, which is rapid prompting method, and that took him like a good 4 years to get even somewhat fluent on it.
Sure.
And it's only in the last couple of 3-4 years that he's become like it's outwardly it looks like he's fluent. Otherwise, I mean, I
Sure.
knew, but it wasn't obvious. So
Right.
yeah, so his poetry is written letter by letter,
Yep.
painstakingly, and his poems are very short. He had his first publication last month.
Oh, awesome.
It was a major publication. His book is called Yellow Flower Gills Me Whole, which is an odd name, but his poetry is also very odd and abstract.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can people buy it? Is it
Yes, it's on
available? Okay.
Amazon, and it's also on
Okay.
all your. It should be on any bookstore that people use, whether it's online or in person.
That's cool.
The publishers are trying to get it into all the bookstores, so yeah, it's definitely online.
Sure. That's awesome. What does he like to do for fun?
Um, he says he likes to drink matcha in expensive coffee shops. So, and
There you
that's
go.
kind of what he's like a people watcher. Like um, with his whether it's with me or with his support workers, he like
Right.
his favorite thing is to like sit in a coffee shop and watch people and have his caregivers gossip with him about said people. So
That's funny.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So do you want to maybe talk about a little bit of what you do, like how, or you said you teach people chemistry and math and stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, what you do, and how people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the boring stuff, which is the teaching AP Chem and AP Calc, because that's kind of self. That's just tutoring the way other people tutor. Um, I I do two things. So on one hand, I work directly with students in Portland, where um, and the students that I work with are minimally speaking or
Mm,
non-speaking, and yeah, so I my goal is to get them to complex education, and usually what I
mhm,
teach is math and science. I tried teaching art to one of my students had expressed an interest in art, and I tried teaching art, and he spelled out using his letterboard that I'm fascinated that you suck at art. So I've stopped teaching art since then. So but so it's
funny.
just math and science. And I also teach parents how to. So this is an online course. Nonlinear
Sure.
education is a course that I offer online a couple of times a year. I try to, and that is to get parents to move from a state of being wherever they are. Usually, their children's academic abilities are underestimated, and through you know, and then often parents are just wanting their child to count or add, and I'm like, okay, look, you can actually do
Right.
algebra or complex science. So that's I lead them through the process of how to work with their kid, regardless of if their child is hyperactive or
Mhm.
non-speaking or refuses to look at them or looks disinterested. These are not in any way signs of intelligence. They are just signs of sometimes an uncomfortable body, and
Mhm.
sometimes that's it's just their neurology. That's what it is. So
Yeah.
that's what nonlinear education is about.
Yeah. It's great. How do you think we can use empathy to be more inclusive?
I think empathy is the only thing we can use to be more inclusive, right? So it's not about using empathy as much as I would think about is that if you're empathetic, no, there's a missing link. If so, ideally, empathy can just be a very passive empathy, like maybe that's not empathy though, like oh poor kid, that kind of thing.
Right.
But if you combine empathy with like a with a certain strength and with the ability to see intelligence in everybody, to me
Mhm.
that is whole empathy. Is that empathy isn't just feeling sorry for someone; it's also seeing value in people and seeing intelligence in people. Then
Right.
there's no choice but to be inclusive, right? So it's not you if you are empathetic, you will be inclusive. If you're not inclusive, you're not empathetic. That's it. It's not about using empathy. That means if you're not being inclusive, you need to check in to see what is it that's
Right.
missing from your worldview, because there's something missing. I can guarantee that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How was the experience of giving the TEDx talk for you?
It was good. It was fun. I'd been wanting to do so. I was glad to, like I'd been applying and I got that. And the
Right.
experience was good. Um, I'm one of those people where it's easier for me to talk to a large group of people than to talk one on one to people. I
Right.
actually would be more nervous in a small party making small talk one on one. I'm not good
Right.
at that. I'm I look like an extrovert, but that's only in public. That's only when I'm like actually delivering a talk. Like I
Yeah.
mean, this would qualify that. But if you just like met me in a social setting, you'd be bored in 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've given two TEDx talks, and yeah, my first one was over 10 years ago, and that
Mhm.
talked about a lot of stuff related to my daughter and about inclusion. But I was quite, I really, it was quite a moving experience for me to like speak out loud some of the things that my daughter and we had experienced about inclusion and bring it into the world. So yeah, it was very,
Nice.
very enjoyable for me too.
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah, so it was
That's
cool.
cool that you've given two talks. I've been thinking of giving a second talk, and I wasn't sure if it was,
Yeah.
worth trying again. But like, did you find that your second talk was also valuable?
It was valuable. It was a different experience. I mean, the first one was in our hometown. It was the first TEDx event they had done, so it was a different feeling. And what the second one was more polished and different, but it was definitely. I'm glad I did it. It's just it was a different experience. Like I said, the first one I had not talked about any of this, shared any of our story publicly, so that was the first time. And since then, I've obviously shared a lot of our stories, so it had a different feeling, but it was worthwhile because it was
Okay.
10 years after I'd given my first one, so it was kind of nice to do another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so that was cool. No, it was fun, but it's definitely interesting. But yeah, yours, I love listening to TEDx talks, and yeah, you're yesterday. So for my day job, I do some mental health work, and now I'm starting to facilitate a DBT group at our organization. And yesterday we talked about the what skill and looking at a picture and trying to observe without judgment and figuring out what the facts are. So your TEDx talk about here's a picture of my son. What do you see in the picture was kind of interesting after I had just done that exercise yesterday. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, how our brain brings us like all those assumptions you talked about that aren't actually facts. They just our brain fills them in and trying to like, okay, it looks like a child and he's sitting on the floor. Like, and my brain's trying to like, okay, what is the fact and what is trying to shut off the other stuff. So it was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is all the things. And I interviewed somebody yesterday where she's in having to use a wheelchair now, and just how people, if she goes out, people talk to the other people with her and not her. So just these weird things that happen when we see, somebody with a different ability or looks different, how our brain comes to these assumptions that we need to recognize them and work on getting rid of or changing them.
Yeah.
So yeah. What is one tip that you can help the listeners or sorry, what is one tip that you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something anybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
I would say dismantle your assumptions about people. So it's
Hmm.
similar to what you, Aaron, said about when people first see a picture. In my TEDx talk, I show a picture of Sid at the time he was 11,
Yep.
and he's like draped over a ball, and he's like, I think that was in a library, and he has his tongue sticking out. And there's
Yep.
so many subconscious assumptions that we make. And in order, you brought up empathy and inclusion, and and to really have empathy, you must be able to see within the innate intelligence and humanness of
Hmm.
everybody, regardless of their disability. And in order to see that, you have to kind of like dismantle some assumptions that you've made, like a tongue sticking out means an intellectual delay, or a
Right.
face that looks like, especially like certain features that are associated with Down syndrome. Our mind
Yeah.
automatically kicks into that person's not going to
Sure.
understand what we're saying.
Hmm.
The same is true for cerebral palsy. Some ways that a child's features can modify, or the way the body
Yep.
moves. A
Yep.
slow movement of a body, we assume, means a slow movement of the mind. And none of these are
Right.
true at all, not even close. And most of our kids, as you know, are probably like quicker than us in many things. And
Yeah.
so I would say the one thing is like check your bias.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. That is a good point. Like you said, like somehow with our brain, if there's a physical, we notice something physical that equates to intelligence. That is interesting.
Yeah. And we
Hmm.
do that even like you said, the for people in wheelchairs, which is just
Yeah.
silly, because that is not, I mean, that's even less to do with
Right.
anything cognitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It is interesting. You think that's just like stuff that we've been taught either directly or indirectly throughout our lives that gets us to that point? It must be stuff we just absorb or our
I
experiences,
think
I guess.
so. I think so, but I maybe one connection is that when people moves, I mean, sometimes when people have like at least certain developmental disabilities that cause slow movement, that often
Mhm.
causes slow speech. And we're
Right.
very trained to associate speech with intelligence. That our whole culture is conditioned that somebody who speaks well, for example, somebody who gives a good TEDx
Right.
talk must be very smart, but they could have just memorized the talk and given it there. So it could be nothing, so
Mhm.
and it
That
could
is
just be
true.
somebody could have written the talk for them. We have politicians who have, what do they call them, like ghostwriters or whatever, all the
Yep.
time. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really, speech has no correlation with the intelligence. But my daughter is neurotypical, so I have a view into a
Yep.
glimpse into the neurotypical world. And I don't know, do you have any neurotypical kids?
Yeah. I have a son that's 15 months older that he was actually on the gifted side of the stuff in school. So we had kind of both edges of it.
Yeah, so you probably see that too. And when you're associating with people, especially because your son's gifted, it's like you see a little bit of shallowness in the neurotypical world, where like
Yeah.
a lot of the you know children who are assumed gifted often, um, you'll see speech and debate is a big thing in the
Right.
neurotypical kids, especially in the Asian community. It's like
Hmm.
everybody's trying to like excel in speech and debate
Yep.
because it shows something. Oh, what does it show? I don't know what I mean, cool, it's
Right.
a skill. You should have that skill. It's great. But we
Yeah.
assume that it relates to intelligence. I think it's a good skill to have. I'm not putting
Yeah.
down anybody who
For
is
sure.
in speech and debate, but it's like I'm able to convey this message because I have good communication
Hmm.
skills myself. So I'm not putting them down by any means. But
Yeah.
I think that as a society, we are too fixated with the idea of speech meaning intelligence. And I think
Yeah.
that's where this whole bias kicks in.
Yeah. Yeah. You made a good point though. Like if somebody gives a good speech or a TEDx talk, they're intelligent. But I mean, yeah, a lot of those speeches, especially like political stuff, they have ghostwriters and or they're using a teleprompter and they're just
Oh,
reading it
totally.
off. So,
Yeah. And even
yeah,
TEDx
it is
talks,
interesting.
I think many TEDx talks have teleprompters. Again, it's
Yeah,
not that it's not good or bad. I'm just saying that it's not
yeah,
representative of intelligence. It's just
yeah,
what it is.
yeah. It is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's important too is, I mean, we need to, you know, take the time and talk to people. I mean, and people that are different than us, or maybe in a wheelchair or have a disability, but we need to talk to more than one. Because I mean, like, there's this saying about if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. Like, everybody has different. I mean, is different. So if we've met one person in a wheelchair that maybe they have some cognitive delays, that doesn't mean everybody that you see in a wheelchair, has a cognitive delay, or, vice versa. So it's just very important to, but
Yeah.
our brain does that stuff automatically. So we need to try to catch it like, hey, why am I thinking that? Let's talk and, assume intelligence aggressively, like you're saying. So yeah,
And I
that
think
makes
what
a
I
lot of sense.
liked, like you said, we need to take the time to talk to people. And I think the
Yes.
key phrase is take time, because when you're
Yep.
talking to a person with a disability, the odds are that it's going to take time for them to communicate.
Right. Yep.
Like, either their speech isn't clear, or they don't even have speech, or they're using some other device, which means that you're probably waiting 5 minutes for them to give a sentence. So,
Right. That's true.
which is great time. Like, for many people, like, I would rather be on my phone than, but then
Yep.
that's kind of where it's a judge of our character, where we can we
Yeah.
wait for 5 minutes? I know it's very hard, but can we wait for that five
Yeah.
minutes?
Well, I know for me too, like I can get where I schedule lots of stuff. I'm super busy, don't have any like time in between things. So you're just running from one thing to the other. And I found where if I try to like not be as busy and have some time in my schedule, that's when I have like, you meet somebody you wouldn't have met otherwise. You notice things that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. So I think it's very important to do. You need to, like you're saying, if I only have 2 minutes in between something, I'm running into a store, I see somebody in a wheelchair. I don't have time in my schedule to, take the time to, really have a conversation with them. So
Mhm.
it's also important if you can to maybe have some extra time where I need, if I want to do that, to have the extra time so I can do it too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to talk about or share that we haven't discussed?
No, I think we covered everything. I would just
Okay.
like round off by saying that drop your biases, and also drop narratives that people have told you about people with disabilities, about
Yeah.
whatever's going on in your head about your own child. Like, if you can just look afresh, a lot of things can change.
Yeah. That's awesome. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
I'm on Instagram, and my
Okay.
handle is Dr. Vaish Sarathy. So that's just doctor. So DrVaishSarathy. So if you go
Okay.
there, there's other links to my website and so on.
Awesome. Ready for the last question?
Yeah.
Do you like spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
No.
I asked that question for all my guests because I live near Austin, Minnesota, where they make spam and where the spam museum is located. So I just been
Uh-huh.
asking just to see what
But
people's
to
reactions are.
full disclosure, I'm vegetarian. So
Yeah,
maybe, yeah.
makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not vegetarian friendly.
Do you like spam meat?
I mean I like it. I don't eat it like a lot, but once or twice a year we'll slice it up and fry it and have it with like pancakes or something. So yeah, once in a while.
Okay.
We don't eat it like every meal or anything like that, but
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.